What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Be sure to smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already done so, comment on these videos, and share them. It really helps the channel a lot. You can always check out all the other Wizard Golf lessons by clicking the icon up here or a link in the description. New videos come out every Sunday, and if you have gained anything from these videos and would like to leave a donation, there are links in the description for that also. So today we're going to continue our discussion on hybrids, and we're going to go over a few more details about how to hit the hybrids and how to get the best possible result out of it. So certainly the first thing to consider when you're approaching your ball and you're thinking about you might be hitting your hybrid clubs, whether it's the 3, the 4, or the 5, really the first thing to inspect on any golf shot is the lie, how the ball is sitting on the ground. Here I'm going to be hitting on just good lies. In future videos we'll talk about how to address and approach other types of lies, rough lies, sitting down a little bit. But the first thing to certainly inspect is the lie. If you have a decent to good lie, then you can hit a hybrid. If the lie is bad, you may want to reconsider. If you cannot get to the bottom of the ball, if it's sitting down in a hole, or if the grass is extremely thick around the ball, the hybrid may not be the best option. So certainly you want to take into consideration these things and inspect the lie and decide if the hybrid is actually going to be a viable option for you to hit on that particular shot. Once I do decide that I want to hit the hybrid, I go through a routine, my pre-shot routine of hitting the ball. And first, that involves deciding what club I want to hit, of course, which hybrid I want to hit. And then my target line, the direction in which I want to send the ball off, where I want the ball to end up. But specifically, what I have to decide is where the ball position is going to be. This is one of the most important factors, and I find that this is a very common error that golfers make, is not actually putting the ball where they can put the club onto the ball, or where it's natural or easiest for them to put the club onto the back of the ball or in the center of the club face. You really don't want to put this ball where it's either too close to you, or too far away, or too far in the front of you, or too far in the back. You want to have it in a location such that it's easy for you to return the club into the ball. In order to help determine that, I set up in the position that I want to hit the ball vertically, standing up, and I have the club to come out of my body at 90 degrees. We're going to talk a little bit more about this in just a minute, but I want to have this club coming out here so I kind of get how far I want the club head away from my body. This would be kind of close, and this would be, fully extended. I also don't like to have my arms locked down. It tends to reduce my feel of the club, and it just doesn't feel that fluid and natural for me to lock either of my elbows into place. I do have them somewhat extended, but certainly not locked down in place like this. So I would want to hit this hybrid somewhere in this position, and notice the club is coming pretty much straight out of my gut, straight out of my center, and the shaft is pretty much parallel with the ground. And from this position, I know this feels very comfortable for me to hold the club here. It would be easy for me to return the club to that position. And so that's kind of where I want the club head to be relative to my body. So from here, I find the position of where that is on the ground by leaning over and just having my right leg forward, my rear leg forward, and bending down. Notice that I'm not just dropping my arms to the ball. I'm not just dropping my arms and decreasing the angle. I'm holding the angle that I have with my body and bending at the waist, bending over to find where that position is. So if I approach the ball and put my right foot here and then bend over, you can see that it's on this side of the ball about 6 inches or so. I cannot take a stance here and just push the club out to like this, because this is no longer a comfortable position for me. I want to have my position at impact here, and so I need to set up that way. So what I have to do is step my foot forward a little bit and try again. And now I've stepped a little bit too much forward, so now I'll step back a little bit. And now I'm getting closer. So now I'm really close. I just stepped forward just a bit, and that feels pretty good to me. I feel like I can get onto the ball there at that position. I'm going to turn a little bit so I'm straighter with the camera. And now I've got kind of this position, this distance away from the ball. Of course, I've hit many balls, so I kind of have this understanding of how far my head and chest needs to be away from the ball, because I've done this many times. But I measure this out. So this is going to be a good distance about how far away from my stance the ball needs to be away from me. From here, then I take my stance. And because I've measured this distance out, now I know that I can return to this position and the club head will be very close to the ball. It's not going to be too much on the toe, or I'm not having to crunch to hit it, or I'm not having to extend too much to hit it. It's in a very comfortable position for me to be able to return the club head to the back of the ball. As you can see there, I can turn and the club head is going to be very close to the center of the ball because I measured that out. So measuring and getting a proper ball position is extremely important just to give you the ability to put the club onto the ball. And you must do this on every shot with every club. This is not just with the hybrids, but I'm explaining it to you here with the hybrid. Secondarily, you want to know where to put the ball in your stance. Many times, it's easy to place the ball too far forward in your stance. If you place the ball too far forward in your stance, you can no longer reach it. You want to really be hitting down on the hybrid slightly. I mean, we don't want to be chopping down on it, but we do have to hit it on a descending blow because the ball is sitting on the ground. And if the ball is in the very front of my stance or too far forward, the club head will no longer be traveling downward, but rather will be flattening out and traveling slightly upward through impact. And I really need the club to be traveling downward through impact. It's better to err on the side of putting the ball too far back than putting the ball too far forward. If you put the ball too far forward and the club hits the ground behind the ball, you'll hit the shot fat or heavy, and fat shots don't tend to go very far because the energy is put into the ground and not into the ball. Whereas playing the ball too far back, you'll typically err on the side of hitting it thin, and a thin shot is going to go much further than a fat shot. So thin misses are preferable over fat or heavy misses. So when I use my ball position, I tend to err on the side of placing the ball further back to ensure that I catch the ball first and not the ground. I do not want to hit the balls fat. I don't mind so much if I hit them slightly thin, but I certainly don't want to catch them an inch or 2 inches behind the ball because you know that the ball will not travel nearly as far. So when you're choosing your ball position, it's helpful to err on the side of putting the ball further back than too far forward. So why do I hold the club and try to hold the shaft that is, at 90 degrees to my body? When I hold the shaft at 90 degrees to my body, especially my upper body, my torso, my spine, it makes it very easy for me to understand how to move the shaft. We cannot move the club head directly. We have to input our energy into the handle, into the grip, which is connected to the shaft. So when I think about moving the club head, I don't think about moving the club head itself necessarily, but I think about how to move this shaft. And if the shaft is perpendicular to me, it makes it very easy for me to understand that I want to move it circularly around using a rotational force, a rotational motion, and not so much of a choppy motion, a vertical motion. So when I have the shaft out at 90 degrees, it makes it easy for me to understand how to move the shaft to get the club head to return back to my address position or something close to my address position. So I use this idea of having the club head a little bit as close to 90 degrees to my body as possible, just to give me an idea of how to move it. So you can see when I set up to this golf ball, I know now that the shaft is pretty much perpendicular to my spine angle, so this makes it very easy for me to understand how to move this shaft. Many golfers set up like this, where their arms are very vertical or straight down hanging, and then the shaft can be in any kind of directions. But now you see it's not so clear how I'm going to get onto this, how I'm going to move the shaft such that I can get the club head back onto the ball, because I don't really have a connection with it anymore. I don't know where the shaft is pointed. It looks like it's pointed towards my hips or my inner thigh. And it's not so clear to me now how I'm going to move this shaft. It seems though that I'm going to have to pick it up quite a bit vertically to get the club back onto the ball. That's what it feels like to me. So it just seems easier to me to have the shaft at 90 degrees to have you get an idea of how you want to move the shaft to then move the club head. Another common error when hitting any golf shot, but particularly longer irons and longer clubs like the hybrid, is that the grip tension is just too tight. You cannot expect to be fluid and relaxed with tension. If you're holding onto the club, squeezing the club, it's going to be difficult for you to release the club. You want to grab the club in such a relaxed manner that it's not twisting in your hand or going to fall out as you swing it, but that you're not actually choking it, that you're not squeezing it so hard that your forearms are tight or that your arms are tight, but particularly your forearms, because as you squeeze your hand, your forearms get tight, and then you can no longer release the club properly. You're trying to hit it with the strength of your arms, which is not what we're trying to accomplish here. We want to be fluid and allow the club to release by itself like this, and not trying to move the club with the strength of my arms. That's not the same thing. I hope you can visualize and see the difference there of those two motions. In order for me to hit it relaxedly and let the club flow and release, my hands have to be relatively light and loose, relaxed, so that the club can throw. Now, I do tend to tighten up a little bit through impact just to prevent the club from going out of my hands, but then I immediately they're relaxed enough that the club can throw so that it can release. If my hands are tight and I squeeze the club, it just doesn't work the same. It's very stiff. It doesn't have the fluidity that it has if the hands are relaxed. So if you're having problems releasing the club, check your grip strength, check your grip tension. Make sure you're not squeezing the club too tightly. Try to relax it as much as you can. The more relaxed it'll be, the more fluid your golf swing will become. So a little bit more on releasing the club. I know most beginner golfers and even golfers that have been seasoned golfers have problems with the shots going out to the right, hitting cut shots or little fades. You may be able to hit the shot pretty well with the shorter irons, wedges and short irons, but as you get to the longer clubs, you probably, many golfers will start hitting a little bit of a fade because the club is no longer getting square at impact. It's slightly open or you're slightly cutting across the ball. Most often this is caused by a late release, meaning the club has not squared up through impact. The club is no longer square, that the club is slightly open. What causes the club head to be open through impact is that the hands are too far ahead of the club head. The club head has not caught back up to the hands to square up. If the hands are too far ahead, the club head is laid open and the shots will tend to go to the right and have a slight cut spin or a fade spin. So the club head really needs to catch up to the hands at impact so that the left arm is relatively straight with the shaft and the club head will be square like this. So at impact, I would want to reach somewhat of this position. On the ground, it would look like this, where the shaft is square, my body is rotated through the ball, shoulders are open, hips are open, but that the shaft has reached this point. Many times through impact, if you're leaving it out, it's because you've reached this point and the hands are too far ahead of the club head, especially if you've been watching videos about trying to compress the golf ball, because they want you to have the hands in front to try to compress the golf ball. Listen, you don't have to do that to compress the golf ball. When you hit the golf ball with this club, it's compressing, I guarantee it. So you don't have to try to compress the golf ball. Just swinging it and striking it with the club will compress the golf ball. It's just a side effect of the collision that happens between the club head and the golf ball. No matter how you hit it, it is compressing somewhat. Of course, maximizing the compression is going to increase the distance, but we're going to make another video on compression later. But understand that to release the club and hit it squarely, the club head must catch up to your hands at impact so that the club face is square. A late release will cause the club head to be open and the shots will tend to go right and have a left to right spin or a fade spin. And if you release early, then the club head will tend to close down and these will be pulls or pull draws. So you have to time your release. And to release the golf club, the hands oftentimes simply aren't strong enough to close the club head through impact because we're moving so quickly and turning the body. I mean, we're using the body to rotate our hands through impact, and our arms, and then to the hands. So oftentimes the hands are not strong enough to actually finish the golf swing and push it through impact. It's very difficult to do that. So in order to release the club, the hands really aren't enough to throw the club into place. What we have to do in order to release and square the club face at impact is decelerate the upper body rotation, the hands, so that the club face will then catch up. If I'm moving in this direction, because at the top of our swing the club is hinged, and once I move back down to impact, it will stay hinged if I continue to accelerate my hands through impact. The club face will never catch up. It's not going to get faster than my hands unless I slow the hands down and then allow the club to catch up through impact. So if you're struggling with closing the club face at impact, it's likely that you're just pulling your hands down too fast, too far, so that the club is lagging behind you all the time and the face is dragged open. Practice slowing your hands or stopping your rotation earlier to allow the club face to square up at impact or somewhere close to that, so that the club face will be more square and send those balls, and you will compress them much better. Last couple of points here. When hitting these longer clubs, we talked about how the dispersion is going to be wider than it would be with any wedge. So this is not going to be a very accurate club. It's something that we're trying to get quite a bit of distance out of, sometimes over 150 yards, maybe up to 250 yards for some of you. But these clubs, these hybrids, are not going to be extremely accurate. So when we're hitting them, we want to prioritize contact and tempo. Usually when we grab these longer clubs, the tendency is like, I have to hit this thing far. So you tend to swing too hard. You grip it too tight, you lose your tempo, you don't swing as well as you should because you're trying to get too much out of it. Trust that the club will put it there, trust your swing, and relax yourself and have a good tempo, and try to prioritize striking the ball squarely and in the center of the club face to give you that maximum distance. When I'm swinging my hybrid, I think about not swinging too hard. When I move my swing back and I turn my body, already I've moved the club back quite far. I think about timing my release such that the club face is square, and I think about prioritizing contact. I would rather swing weaker and hit it right in the center of the club face than swing harder and scull it or hit it fat or hook it or whatever other missed shot I may hit. I'd rather hit it, just a little bit shorter and well than swing really hard and hit it terribly. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Catch you guys next week. You can always check out 2 of my other videos here and subscribe here.